there is a conference to constitute a negative clause with the general verb. The adverb not describes the modal verb to emphasize the definition of the general verb, so that the adverb not describes the definition of the general verb indirectly. We can understand the role of the modal verb did, do, does, or will to emphasize the definition of the verb. We can understand that the modal verb did, do, or does emphasizes the definition of the general verb. And
reveals
the information about
the subject instead of the general verb.
The modal verb do or does reveals the second and third role of a verb, that is to present the tense of a clause, and the information about the subject, about the number of the subject, and whether the subject participates in the conversation with the speaker and the listeners or not. The modal verb did or will reveals the tense of the clause.
We can say that the modal verb did or will takes on the second role of a verb.
The modal verb did
is applied to specify the definition of a general verb, and we can review that the be verb reveals the fact that the clause is stated in the past tense with the two forms of the be verb, was or were.
The modal verb
Did
is applied to describe the general verb, and the modal verb will is applied to describe
either
the general verb
or
be verb. We will study how to state a negative statement with the application of the adverb not. There are other adverbs, including not, to change the positive statement into the negative statement. We will study about one of the adverbs not to change the positive statement into the negative statement. The adverb not directly specifies the definition of the be verb. This can be understood with the fact that the primary definition of the be verb is to describe the existence of the subject. The opposite definition of the subject that exists is the only one that the subject doesn't exist. So the speaker applies the adverb not to specify the definition of the be verb in the direct way, because there isn't any other way to be interpreted other than the original intent of the speaker. The definition of the general verb is specified by the modal verb did, do or does, or will according to the tense. And the adverb not specifies the other adverb, that is the modal verb, did, do, or. We can understand this indirect description of the adverb not to specify the definition of the modal verb.
Firstly,
And the modal verb specifies the definition of the verb.
for emphasis.
We can understand this indirect specification by the adverb not from the various interpretation of the opposite definition of an experience or condition or an action.
This is comparable to the fact that there is the only opposite interpretation of the subject described by a be verb into a way that the subject exists.
We can simply think of these various
And
possible interpretation with the consideration. What is the opposite condition of the action? Swimming. What is the opposite of
the action
swimming? Most of us may think of the condition that we are in the static condition.
at first.
We just exist. When our friend asks us about, hey, what are you doing? And we can respond to the friend, I'm not swimming right now. Then how can the friend interpret our current state? The friend can think of the static state of us at first, and the friend can think of the condition of us except swimming. We can take a rest, we can read the Bible, we can eat a meal, or etc.
We can understand that we can think of the antonym of a verb swim at second.
So we can understand the indirect way to apply
The specification by
the adverb not from this various possibility to understand the opposite condition of an experience, a condition or an action of a subject. So the speaker emphasizes the definition of the general verb at first with the application of the modal verb, and the speaker changes the interpretation into the opposite way in a strong extent. to avoid the ambiguity. But we admit that there can be ambiguity about interpreting the statement, I'm not swimming right now. There is an example. He does not open the door. The adverb not describes the emphasized definition of the general verb open by the modal verb does. So we can also understand that the speaker can intend the ambiguity. We can think of various possibilities to understand the condition of the subject indicated by the personal pronoun he, who already exists. We can also understand the reason why the speaker prefers the positive statement, because it conveys the definite intent of the speaker. So the adverb not makes this clause convey the condition of the subject to be in a condition to remain in the closed condition, opposite to the action indicated by the general verb open. The first, we can think of the static condition of the subject, and the second possibility to understand the condition of the subject may be possible by thinking of the antonym of the verb open. So this relationship between the consideration of the action indicated by the general verb open to the action indicated by the general verb close
as the antonym of the transitive verb open
may be possible because the adverb not, because the modal verb emphasizes the definition of the general verb at first, so that the listeners can think of the second possibility to interpret the condition of the subject.
intense enough to reach to the definition of the antonym,
rather than the consideration that the subject just exists in a static condition. And the adverb not to specify the definition of the modal verb to emphasize the definition of general verb may make us to reach to the consideration that the subject may be in the opposite condition that can be understood from the antonym of the transitive verb open. The adverb not to describe the definition of the general verb open conveys the vague intention that the condition of the subject is described as any condition except the action indicated by the phrase of the verb open the door. The first interpretation about the statement, I'm not swimming right now, can be the static condition that is the premise of a statement. And the indirect way to specify the definition of the general verb to specify by the specification by the adverb not in the indirect way may make us reach to the interpretation to the second possibility about thinking into the definition of the antonym. So the speaker avoids the constitution of a clause that the adverb not describes the general verb directly. The direct specification by the adverb for not for the be verb may be possible because there are only two ways to interpret the opposite condition of the subject who exists into a way that the subject doesn't exist.